Revenge with Karen.
The fire alarm didn't go off because Linda fixed the breach before it could spark. That's the job: quiet, invisible, unglamorous. At 6:13 a.m. on a Tuesday, while most of the office was still horizontal, in bed scrolling TikTok or snoozing their third alarm, Linda Carter was already in the compliance dashboard, rerouting vendor access and locking down a permissions misfire that could have exposed client data to a subcontractor in Slovakia. Only thing louder than the breach was the silence that followed, because no one knew it ever happened. She wrote the post-incident summary in 50 minutes, dry as a stale Triscuit, issue identified and resolved. Vendor 12B access restored via secure key rotation. Logs attached. She attached a full risk chain analysis, labeled the packet resolved, and forwarded it to Stratwell Systems' new COO, former consulting wonderkind named Drew with teeth too white and metaphors that all involved war or chess. He didn't open the file, didn't reply, just moved on to the next meeting where he used phrases like streamline headcount and optimize vertical ownership while sipping alkaline water like it held secrets. Linda didn't flinch. She was used to this. 5 years of putting out fires before they started. 5 years of being the name in size 9 font at the bottom of the quarterly board notes under risk oversight. She didn't want applause. But a thanks, Linda once in a while wouldn't hurt. Instead, the COO dropped by her team's weekly sync just to announce he was cutting their conference budget. Zoom works fine, he said, before wandering off to expense a steak dinner with a guy he called an ideas guy. Still, Linda stayed late that night, checking the SOC 2 compliance protocols, updating the external vendor access logs, adjusting the amendment clauses on their master services agreements. If that sounds like gibberish, that's kind of the point. Linda understood every inch of it, and it mattered. Now, before we go deeper, quick favor. If you're listening and think, damn, this is exactly the kind of quiet office chaos I live through every week, hit that like button and toss us a follow. No pressure. 95% of folks forget to subscribe, and trust me, it helps the team keep digging up these stories. All right, back to the slow burn fire. Linda didn't dress flashy. Her cubicle was a shrine to efficiency: dual monitors, a don't talk to me until I've audited something mug, and a ficus that thrived under fluorescent light like a mutant. Her team loved her, quietly. They called her the firewall in heels behind her back. She found hilarious since she usually wore orthopedic flats and compression socks. But to the execs, she was just a line item. The compliance department, bureaucratic overhead, non-revenue generating, that phrase was the kiss of death. Still, she stayed in her lane, until the whispers started. Stratwell was prepping for something. People were dressing nicer. The finance team was pulling longer hours. There were NDA lockboxes in the printer room. Rumors of a merger with a firm out of Chicago started swirling. Linda wasn't in those meetings. Compliance rarely is. But her email volume doubled overnight with quick reviews and last looks for updated contracts. That's when she noticed it. A vendor clause, tucked deep in the new MSA draft, had been stripped of a line she had personally added last quarter, required the signature of the named compliance officer on any merger or acquisition document that involved data handoffs. Legal hadn't flagged it. Maybe they thought it was redundant. But to Linda, it was the one thing protecting them from signing off on a deal while blindfolded. She rewrote it, reinserted it, quietly pushed it back through. Did she mention it to anyone? No, she knew better. She saved a copy, flagged it in her system, logged the change, and herself an encrypted backup, because if Stratwell was going to pretend compliance didn't matter, she sure as hell wasn't going to be their scapegoat when it all went sideways. The COO never thanked her, never noticed. That was okay. She had a strange feeling he'd notice soon enough. The smirk on Drew's face was the kind of thing you'd only find on a man who thought he'd just outsmarted gravity. Compliance, he said, circling the word on the whiteboard like it owed him money, is a cost center. We don't generate revenue babysitting paperwork. We outsource paperwork. It was Friday. Not just any Friday, layoff Friday. Linda knew the signs. HR reps in Slacks too crisp for casual, calendars mysteriously blocked, Slack messages starting with, "Hey, got a minute?" She walked into the conference room knowing it was her turn under the axe. But she didn't expect him to be so gleeful about it. "We appreciate your service," Linda said, using the same tone people use when giving condolences at funerals for people they barely knew. "You built a great foundation, truly." But this company's entering a new phase. He clicked to the next slide, a pie chart with strategic growth and sales efficiency eating up 80% of the circle. Compliance, a gray sliver labeled admin drag, her entire department reduced to a rounding error. She looked over at her team, 4 brilliant weirdos who knew how to make sense of audit logs like they were reading horoscopes. Amelia, who color-coded risk tiers like a religious ritual. Jordan, who once found a $12 million licensing loophole on page 197 of a boilerplate contract. Gone, all gone, not with shouts, not with drama, just erased. We're confident the third-party firm in Mumbai can handle most of the heavy lifting, Drew said. He was talking about dry cleaning instead of regulatory compliance for a company handling sensitive client data across 3 jurisdictions. Linda nodded, once. No questions, no pleas, no box of desk things held dramatically to her chest. Just quiet composure, the kind that unsettles people used to noise. Her final act? She sat back down at her desk, ignored the email from IT saying her access would be revoked in 20 minutes, typed exactly what she needed to. She pulled the flagged MSA versions, the audit trail logs, the encryption keys, everything she'd touched in the last 18 months. She compressed them into an encrypted archive, labeled it Legacy Risk Archive LC, and sent it to her personal Proton mail. Legally, she wasn't taking anything proprietary. These were her notes, her flagged clauses, her red-line commentary. No client data, no passwords, just her brain. File form. Then she opened her compliance system access one last time. On the screen was a simple, blinking field labeled Successor Officer, Pending. She didn't touch it, didn't fill it out. Just left a small sticky note on her keyboard with a single sentence. Remember to confirm your named officer before transaction close. No one would read it, at least not yet. Downstairs, the woman from HR handed her a beige envelope with the usual COBRA instructions. Final paycheck, resources for your next steps. Linda stuffed it into her bag without a glance. She already knew her next step. In the elevator, she passed Drew. He gave her a finger gun and a wink. Go enjoy your weekend, Linda, he said like he hadn't just cut her off from a career she'd built with every damn ounce of her sleep-deprived 40s. She smiled. You too, Drew. Hope the weekend doesn't come with subpoenas. He laughed like it was a joke. She didn't. Outside. It was gray, not raining, not clear, just gray, the kind of weather that feels like a pause button. Linda walked to her car, turned on the ignition, and didn't pull out of the parking lot for a full 20 minutes. She wasn't crying. She was listening to the silence. It was the first time in years she wasn't responsible for every fire alarm in the building. She should have felt small, defeated. Instead, she felt surgical. Clean, like the last scalpel stroke before the patient bleeds. Because while the execs toasted their leaner future, they didn't realize the merger Drew was slobbering over relied on one clause, a clause she'd embedded 6 weeks ago, buried in a file no one knew how to read, tied to one name. And that name had just walked out the front door. The badge clinked like a funeral bell when Linda laid it on the desk. Thin plastic rectangle. Stratwell Systems. Employee #20713. No tears. No thank you card. No cheap sheet cake in the break room with best wishes scrawled in pink frosting that tasted like regret. Just a quiet click of the ID lanyard coil recoiling like a snake as she let it go. The HR room smelled like dust and lavender hand sanitizer. The intern assigned to her exit looked about 12. Her name was Bree. She had a purple pen and a nervous smile. Linda sat across from her, arms folded, posture military straight. So, you've been with the company 5 years, correct? Bree asked, squinting at the printed packet like it was an ancient scroll. Correct. Okay, cool. Just a couple of standard questions. Did you feel supported in your role? No. Pause. Bree looked up. Do you want to elaborate? No. She scribbled something. Probably a smiley face with a frown next to it. All right, what was your job title again? Was it like auditor or something with systems? Linda's eyebrow lifted like a garage door. I was the named compliance officer. Oh, okay, that sounds important. Linda just stared, no nod, no confirmation, just you're not the enemy, but you're a symptom. Bree flipped to the last page. All right, last thing, IT says your system access will be sunset by end of day, so we'll just take your badge and then you're all set. All set, Linda repeated softly, as if confirming a kill. She stood, turned to go, then paused at the door. Reached into her bag, pulled out one sheet of paper, folded 3 times, no signature, and slid it across the desk like a blackjack dealer. What's this? Bree asked. Reminder, Linda said, for whoever replaces me. In a courier font at the center of the page, 5 words, confirm successor officer before merger. That was it. No letterhead, no threat, just a ticking clock disguised as a helpful post-it. She walked out without looking back. No farewell Slack message. No LinkedIn status about exciting new chapters. No whispers in the break room. She didn't need to flip a table to make an impact. She just needed gravity to do what it always does, pull everything down the moment one critical screw goes missing. Linda's name was still listed on 3 systems they hadn't bothered to update. Compliance keys were still embedded in their authentication protocol. Her digital signature still authenticated key vendor chains. In short, Stratwell wasn't compliant without her, but no one noticed, because Drew was busy sucking up to the Chicago buyers, and HR thought a named officer was probably a guy from payroll. The building had holes, and Linda had been the sealant no one ever thanked. At home, she didn't rage. She fed her cat, did a load of laundry, opened her encrypted archive to triple-check every file. Not paranoid, just thorough. She read the clause again, the one she'd quietly slid into the master services agreement the week she saw the merger decks circulate. Simple language, no fluff. Any data transaction, audit certification, or ownership transfer requires co-signature from the current active compliance officer of record. Then the kicker: failure to confirm succession shall pause transactional validity pending third-party legal review. In other words, no compliance officer, no merger. The beauty of it? They'd agreed to it, signed it, archived it, forgot about it. Linda didn't need to sabotage anything. She just had to walk away with her name still on the dotted line and no one left behind to scratch it out. The system would do the rest. And when it did, the Chicago buyers' legal team did what legal teams always do and combed through every line of every contract with the curiosity of a raccoon on espresso. They'd hit that clause. They'd ask a question, and no one at Stratwell would have an answer. Linda didn't slam doors on the way out. She just made sure the locks still had her name engraved in them. The first tremor came in a quick follow-up email from the buyer's associate counsel, a woman named Sam, with a resume that read like a legal thriller and a signature line that included SIP/US, JD, MBA. She asked for updated vendor logs, active compliance personnel lists, and casually, like she was ordering lunch, an updated organizational chart, including the current compliance officer of record. The Stratwell finance team forwarded it to HR. HR forwarded it to legal. Legal kicked it upstairs to Drew, who forwarded it to someone PLS handle. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was how the countdown began. Inside Stratwell, the vibe was champagne before the finish line. Execs were strutting around like Powerball winners, talking in percentages and golden parachutes. Drew held impromptu synergy huddles and kept saying things like we're days away from closing, as if sheer optimism could sign documents. But down in the quieter trenches, accounts payable, systems, legal interns, things were slower, more cautious. Because buyer diligence is like a colonoscopy, thorough, painful, and nothing escapes unnoticed. Requests started flooding in. PDF folders titled FY22 Compliance and SOC2 Ready were zipped, unzipped, resent. Stratwell scrambled to look buttoned up. They tried reassembling Linda's old documentation trail like it was IKEA furniture with half the screws missing. And then the email came. Subject line, clarification, named compliance signatory. It was from a junior finance analyst on the buyer's side, some poor kid named Nolan who probably thought he was just checking a box. The email was polite, even friendly. But the question hit harder than a subpoena. Can you confirm who currently holds the named compliance officer designation at Stratwell Systems, whether they have reviewed the revised MSAV 3.6C dated April 12? It was CC'd to 4 people. The room went still. CFO replied with a quick, looping in HR and legal for visibility. HR replied, we'll need to confirm with IT on current designations. Legal replied, reviewing current personnel lists will advise. And Drew ghosted. Not even a thumbs-up emoji. Because in that moment, all realized something might be off. No one could remember if they'd officially replaced Linda. There'd been talks about a consultant, maybe someone from the outsourced Mumbai team, but no forms had been signed, no designation filed, and that note Linda left, confirmed successor officer before merger, had long since been recycled, if it was even read at all. The silence was growing teeth now. Someone tried to search the shared drive for compliance officer succession. Only result? A 5-year-old birthday card signed to Linda, our firewall. Cute. Another folder titled LC Legacy Docs was found, but password locked. Meanwhile, the buyer's team kept requesting more. They asked for log access. They wanted to see revision histories. Someone flagged a metadata inconsistency in the MSA file. And then Nolan followed up with, just checking again on the signatory confirmation. You anticipate any delays on the compliance side before sign-off. This time, he CC'd a partner. At Linda's old desk, now occupied by a marketing contractor who thought compliance was a dress code, the monitors were blank. The nameplate still hadn't been replaced, but her ghost was everywhere in file names, in comment trails, in autofill dropdowns. The thing about invisible work, it's only invisible until it's gone. Across town, Linda watched the company LinkedIn page. Watched as Stratwell posted big news coming soon, with a champagne emoji and a photo of Drew in a blazer that cost more than her last bonus. Her lips curled, but it wasn't quite a smile. She clicked open her encrypted archive. Read the clause again. Simple, bulletproof, legally binding. The question had been asked. The buyer's team had begun the hunt. Now all she had to do was let them find the answer. It started with a footnote, buried in the 218-page merger checklist from the buyer's law firm, right under Confirm Environmental Certifications, and just above Finalize Escrow Triggers, was a line that read, Right arrow validate active compliance signatory, per MSA Clause 12D. A legal assistant named Tori flagged it in red, added a comment bubble, Stratwell to confirm designated officer. Required pre-close, and sent it up the chain without fanfare. When that red bubble hit the partner's screen, everything stopped. Tori didn't know the backstory. She wasn't aware of Linda Carter or Friday firings or cost center purges. She was just doing her job, making sure every clause in the merger docs lined up with every clause in the MSA. And Clause 12D, that one had bite. Inside Stratwell, the mood was shifting. What was supposed to be a week of champagne rehearsals and smug victory laps turned into a frantic game of hot potato. The email came in with the subject line, Urgent, Officer of Record Confirmation, MSA Clause 12D. It was short, direct, the kind of email that smells like liability. Pursuant to our review of the updated Master Services Agreement, require written confirmation of Stratwell's currently designated named Compliance Officer of Record for purposes of data transfer authorization and audit continuity. This is a required item for legal sign-off. Please advise ASAP. It was sent to legal, HR, the coup, and the external M and a counsel. The response, panic, but the corporate kind, clean, quiet, in suits. Legal asked HR. HR asked IT. IT said, assumed legal was handling the designation. HR's director, a woman named Trina who thought named officer was a military term, called Drew. Hey, just looping you in, she said. There's some contract clause asking for compliance sign-off. Drew exhaled like she'd asked him to solve quantum mechanics. Yeah, we transitioned that. It's with the India team, but do we have it on file? Just pull whoever's name is in the platform. We didn't update it. Beat. You mean you didn't update it? It still says Linda Carter. Silence. You fired Linda Carter, I know that, and she wasn't replaced. I know that too, Trina. A second silence heavier. Drew sent an email, short, clipped. We'll have an update shortly. But shortly came and went. The India contractor was just a placeholder. No formal designation. No amendment signed. No delegation of authority filed. The field in the compliance platform still listed Linda. Digital signature still bound to the audit logs. Her credentials still embedded in the file hierarchy. Like she never left, because functionally, she hadn't. Someone pulled up the MSA. Version 3.6c. Clause 12D stared back at them like a loaded gun. All merger or acquisition activity involving data transmission, risk certification, or systems migration shall require co-signature by the active, designated named compliance officer. If such officer is not appointed or succession is incomplete, the transaction shall be paused pending legal review and external audit. Underneath it was the date, April 12. Just 6 weeks before Linda was shown the door. And the author metadata, the redline history, L. Carter. Drew tried to bluff. She must have slipped that in after hours. That's not standard language. Legal raised an eyebrow. It's in the signed version. Buyer countersigned. Then remove it. We can't. It's binding and it's discoverable. Drew's voice got tight. Then find someone to name. That takes time and board approval, then lie, no. In another part of town, Linda sipped chamomile tea and watched the seconds tick by on her kitchen clock. Her cat sat curled on the counter, purring like a loaded engine. Her phone buzzed, anonymous number. She didn't answer. It buzzed again, same number. She turned it face down and opened her laptop. Her encrypted archive was untouched, the claws still intact. Her name still everywhere they'd forgotten to erase it. The calls would keep coming, because someone had finally read it. And now, every clean-looking document they'd stacked up to impress the buyers had a crack, and that crack spelled her name. At 8:41 a.m., the deal was supposed to be ironclad. Documents prepped, e-signatures pending. The boardroom was being staged like a courtroom wedding, nameplates, water pitchers, other folders lined up like sacred texts. A photographer waited just outside to capture the handshake shot that would make the business section by noon. Then someone pulled out the wrong checklist. It was from the buyer's counsel. A final pre-close verification. Nothing fancy, just a bulleted list of signatory confirmations, filed under standard execution audit. Drew barely glanced at it before sliding it to legal with a smug "we're good, right." The fourth line down said, "Confirm current named compliance officer for co-signature, per MSA 12D. Required pre-validation." Legal went pale. No one moved. Drew blinked. "Wait, what?" "We need the officer's name," said the buyer's lawyer. "Not just the title, the individual." "Well, it was Linda Carter," said Trina from HR, her voice brittle. The buyer's GC raised an eyebrow. "And now?" Trina looked around. "It's not finalized. Yet. It's vacant. No, we're transitioning it. Then who's on record?" A silence thick enough to bottle and sell as anxiety. Drew cleared his throat. "We've got someone handling those duties remotely, but they're not designated. Well, not formally, but the function's covered." The buyer's GC set his pen down. Slowly, like he was disarming a bomb. "This clause doesn't care about function. It requires designation. With documentation." He turned the page. Her own version of the MSA stipulates that without an appointed, named compliance officer, the transaction must pause pending legal review and independent audit. He looked up. "So, who do we call?" Drew opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The woman from internal legal mumbled, "We're reviewing the options." "No, we're not," said the buyer's GC. "We're asking for name." The room was suddenly too warm. Air conditioning clicked on with a hollow hum that felt louder than conversation. In the corner, the external counsel, brought in for show mostly, began quietly packing up her folder. "I'd advise we hold signatures until this is resolved," she said flatly. "You don't want to record a breach in the opening week." Drew laughed nervously. "Look, this is a formality. It's not," the GC cut in. "It's a fail-safe." Across town, Linda sat at her window, watching the neighborhood dogwalker attempt to corral a corgi that had decided the middle of the sidewalk was now sacred ground. Her tea had gone cold. She didn't mind. The second buzz from her phone had come and gone. This time, they left a voicemail. She didn't listen to it, not yet. Back in the boardroom, Drew was sweating. "We're naming a replacement now. You'll have it in writing within the hour." The GC shook his head. "Won't work. Why not?" Clause 12D requires an active officer to co-sign prior to execution. Not post. Not retroactively. You don't get to duct tape a name to a legal document after the fact and hope it passes. This isn't high school. There's no makeup quiz. He leaned forward. "Find the officer, or this deal doesn't close," and there it was. The hammer hadn't dropped, but it was in the air now. And Linda was the gravity. "Who replaced Miss Carter?" Buyer's general counsel asked, voice low, clipped, and devoid of theatrics. Not a rhetorical question. Not a trap. Just legal fact-checking, the kind that turns million-dollar signatures into poison if answered wrong. Stratwell's table fell silent. Trina from HR looked like she was trying to remember where her mouth was. The CFO, Russell, a man who once said compliance was like digital janitorial work, flipped through the printed board packets with a kind of frantic politeness, like the officer's name might be stuck between the catering invoice and the post-merger PR draft. "Well," he started, "we had plans to outsource the role, but we hadn't formalized the transition. No designation letter, no. No onboarding doc, internal memo, security credentials issued." A long pause. "No," Russell admitted, his voice paper-thin. The buyer's GC nodded once. "So, just to be absolutely clear on the record, there is no current named compliance officer of record at Stratwell Systems." No one answered. The GC glanced at his associate, who typed something into the deal tracking sheet and highlighted a cell in red. Then, from somewhere down the table, soft as a confession, someone muttered, "We never updated the systems." The words floated like smoke. A senior analyst from IT, called in last minute as technical support, added, "Linda Carter's credentials are still active in our system. Her digital signature is still embedded in the master log archive and tied to our vendor compliance platform. We never revoked it." The buyer's GC turned the page on his binder and read the clause aloud, slow and methodical. "All merger activity involving regulatory certification or data system migration requires co-signature of the active named compliance officer. In the event of vacancy, transitional documentation must be filed and signed prior to execution." He looked up. "There is no co-signature. There is no filed transition." He paused. "Therefore, there is no deal." It hit like a car crash in a library. The photographer waiting outside was quietly told to leave. The intern manning the deal closed. Email draft deleted it without saving. Russell leaned back in his chair, eyes on the ceiling like he was waiting for divine intervention. Trina's pen slipped from her fingers. Drew's jaw clenched so hard you could hear his teeth grind. And Linda was at her kitchen table, folding laundry. A voicemail sat on her phone, unopened. She didn't rush to play it. She already knew the shape of its contents. They'd stepped over her, wiped her name off the org chart like it was chalk. But the systems didn't forget. The contracts didn't forget. And now, neither did the buyers. Most deafening thing in that boardroom wasn't a slammed fist or a shouted curse. It was her absence. It was a single name, Linda Carter, hanging over the deal like a law they didn't know they'd broken. And no one, not the CFO, not Drew, not HR, could fix it with an apology or a revised draft. They had already signed on a foundation that no longer existed. And it was cracking. 9:00 a.m. sharp. The conference room had been polished into theater. Mahogany gleamed. Pens were aligned like surgical tools. A breakfast spread sat untouched in the corner, croissants no one would eat, coffee going cold in porcelain cups, a fruit tray already beginning to sweat under the lights. The CEO sat at the head of the table, one hand clasped over the other like he was posing for Forbes. Drew stood near the window, arms folded, trying to look relaxed. The board flanked them, fresh haircuts, tight smiles, waiting for the gavel drop moment, the official sign-off on a $190 million merger that would secure their names in whatever Wall Street footnote Stratwell could earn. Then the buyer's general counsel stood. Black suit, no notes, just the MSA in one hand, a highlighter cap clenched between two fingers like a blade. He cleared his throat. "In accordance with Clause 12D, he began slowly, we are unable to proceed." Silence. No one blinked. He turned the page. Without an active officer of record, named, designated, and currently employed, all merger terms are automatically paused pending external audit and legal review. He shut the binder with a single, precise motion. Across the table, Trina from HR inhaled sharply, too fast. She choked once, caught it, tried to recover. Russell closed his eyes, didn't open them again. Drew, his face drained like a man staring at his own name in a lawsuit headline. And the woman who'd fired Linda, the same one who said, with that condescending lip twitch, "Thanks for your service, Linda, but compliance just isn't strategic right now," tightened her grip on her cup and whispered, "Wait." But this was all signed, this was done. The GC didn't even look at her. He turned instead to the CEO. "Your team failed to replace a critical officer required by your own contract. You filed no transition letter. You submitted no designation. And your systems still list Miss Carter as active. I'm sure we can," the CEO began. "No, you can't." He gestured to his associate, who silently packed up the signature folders. "We'll resume due diligence pending confirmation of compliance protocol, successor designation, legal review of all data transfer activity conducted post-termination of the officer of record." And then, thud. The ceramic coffee cup slipped from the VP's hand, hit the table's edge, and cracked. Coffee splashed across her binder, dripping onto the floor. No one moved to clean it up. The buyer's GC barely blinked. "This isn't personal," he said quietly. "It's structural." Outside the boardroom, the photographer packed up her tripod. No pictures, no applause, just a meeting that never happened. Somewhere in the HR Slack channel, a confused intern typed, "Do we still send the cake?" and got no reply. And across the city, Linda Carter sat at a small metal cafe table outside a corner bakery. It was sunny, crisp. Her coffee was hot. Her name was trending on the internal IT ticket system, and her inbox, long dormant, was beginning to sprout apology-laced checking in messages like weeds after a storm. He didn't open them yet. She didn't need to, because she hadn't shouted. She hadn't gone nuclear. She just let the claws speak, and the claws had perfect aim. The call came just after noon. Unknown number, Chicago area code. Linda let it ring twice, just enough to let the moment breathe, then answered like she'd been expecting it all week. Carter, a brief pause. Then, Miss Carter, this is Samantha Cho, General Counsel for Avalon Partners. I believe you're aware of the situation. I saw, Linda replied, calm, even stirring her tea. We'd like to speak about reinstatement. Another pause, longer this time. Under new terms, Samantha clarified quickly. That got a smile out of Linda. She didn't need to ask what those terms were. The merger was frozen in amber until she touched it. They didn't need her permission. They needed her signature. Her name wasn't leverage, it was oxygen. By 2:17 p.m., it was on a video call with Avalon's executive committee. Not Stratwell, not Drew, not HR, the buyers. By 3:40 p.m., a digital offer letter was in her inbox. Title, Chief Risk Integration Officer. Reporting to Avalon Board of Directors. Salary, tripled. Conditions, full operational autonomy. Bypass of Stratwell executive structure. Strategic authority on compliance systems across the merged entity. She accepted without counter. Terms were already perfect. At 4:12 p.m., Stratwell's COO Drew was officially transitioned into an advisory role. The press release used words like grateful and visionary. Internally, his access was revoked before he could finish reading it. Trina from HR announced an extended wellness sabbatical effective immediately. The woman who fired Linda vanished from the org chart before sunset. And Linda, she walked into the building the next morning, not through the employee entrance, but through the executive wing. No one greeted her, not because they didn't see her, but because they didn't know what to say. She passed her old office. It was empty now, just a ghost shell. Her new office had two things, a standing desk with 3 monitors and a fresh, piping hot cup of black coffee already waiting. She sat, unbothered, logged in, drafted her first internal memo. It was short, unapologetic. Compliance is not a cost center. It's the firewall between you and collapse. She hit send, and that was it. No grand speech. No press release with her name in lights. But from that day forward, every exec in the building triple-checked the compliance log before they opened their mouths. Because the woman they erased had become the claws that erased them. And now she was the firewall, with teeth. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.